Hi everybody, this is Eric Johnson. Today we are going to continue with part 2 of my interview with Mr. X. Before we do that, however, I would like to change my glasses so I can read. And I would like to address a few comments that I got after the first interview with Mr. X. The first issue I'm going to refer to is a comment someone made, and they were referring to Fenn. And they fell for what has been a revisionist view of Fenn and the entire chase by Jack Stoof. Jack Stoof came out, let's go back in time. Before Forrest Fenn died, we knew nothing about Jack Stoof. We didn't know anything. He was the finder. He wanted to remain anonymous. Forrest Fenn didn't really know the guy, said I'd never really met him. There was some confusion as to whether they'd had one or two emails. Jack Stoof was in the wind. He was the finder. That's all we knew. Forrest Fenn literally comes out and congratulates the search community for the time and effort they put into looking for the treasure. He does not congratulate the finder. He doesn't congratulate Jack Stoof. Before Forrest Fenn died, please remember this, we knew nothing about Jack Stoof. The finder, Jack Stoof, would prefer to remain anonymous. There will be no more information from Jack Stoof. Blah, 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 blah. It's all we heard. The minute Forrest Fenn dies, Jack Stoof's taking emails, writing an article for Medium. Hi, I'm Jack Stoof. I found it. Blah, 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 blah. Claims that Barbara Anderson outed him because she sued him, etc. Now, let me tell you something. I'm learning more in the background about what's going on that's making me even more suspicious about what is going on than I have been. And I've been pretty suspicious all along. But I'm getting more suspicious the more I'm kind of talking to different people. But let me address one issue that I cannot stress enough. Please, for the love of God, do not come on my page and attribute things Jack Stoof has said that Fenn said as gospel. Someone, and I won't mention who they are, but once in a while I'm going to just mention comments I get. This person said, don't forget, because we were discussing Jack Stoof and stuff, and he said, well, don't forget, Forrest Fenn thought Jack was a genius. Jack said that. There is no record of Forrest Fenn saying Jack Stoof is a genius. Jack Stoof said, Forrest Fenn and I were great friends. I mean, how many times have I been over this? I hear myself repeating myself. Jack Stoof said, Forrest Fenn and I were great friends. Forrest Fenn liked me so much, said Jack, he wants me to come out to Santa Fe and live near him. I don't know how that would have remained anonymous, since Jack wants to remain anonymous, or wanted to at the time. But apparently, Forrest Fenn was telling us that Jack wants to remain anonymous, and at the same time was telling Jack, according to Jack, that, hey, I love you so much, I want you to come out and live near me. Let's not forget something else, too. And we all know where I'm coming from. Forrest Fenn was a conservative. He was real conservative. He once said something like, well, I'm kind of a reformed Sultan. It's kind of like I'm trying to round the edges a little bit. But Jack Stoof is a very liberal guy. Wrote for The Onion, made fun of Sarah Palin's kid for having Down syndrome. I mean, this guy, to my way of thinking, I can't believe. It just doesn't seem logical to me that Forrest Fenn just set aside all of that kind of stuff because Jack found the treasure. That Forrest Fenn just almost adopted him. Oh my God, I love you. It just doesn't jive with Forrest Fenn. And then the idea of the location. Jack said Forrest Fenn never wanted the location known. Forrest Fenn never said that. Forrest Fenn, in numerous interviews, people would say, what do you want done about the location and the poem, etc.? Forrest Fenn would say whatever the finder wants. If the finder wants to explain the poem, he can do that. If the finder wants to give up the location, he can do that. That's what Forrest Fenn said. But Jack Stoof, oh no. Forrest Fenn didn't want it known at all. He wanted to keep it pristine. It was so special to him. Forrest Fenn once said, you know what? It's real special to me. I'm not sure it's that special to anyone else. I'm not sure they could really see anything special about it. It's just special to me. People are falling for this. Revisionist history by Jack Stoof. Forrest Fenn started a freaking worldwide treasure hunt to find the location. Doesn't it seem a little odd to you that he would be almost obsessive about not revealing it once it's found? I really want you guys to go out there and find it. Oh, someone found it. We can't tell anyone where it was. Yes, Belle? What? I know that sound. She's got one of her stuffed mice, her little mice. Are you bringing me a mouse? Cats are a trip. I love dogs too, by the way. You guys realize that, right? I've had dogs. Love dogs. Had a dachshund and had a border collie shepherd mix. Really, I love dogs. When I move out near Charleston, I try to get a nice big yard with a fence. Have a dog. These guys will just have to put up with it. Tober's over there. Belle's out there doing God knows. You can hear. You get my point, though. Quit falling for this bull crap. I just could not believe it when I read that. Well, don't forget, Forrest Fenn thought Jack was a genius. Yeah, who told us that? Jack! Don't be so easily swayed by the... Hey, honey, are you coming or not? You're kind of getting on my last nerve here. Here. All right, that's all I wanted to say. Comments. I've seen more than one, or I wouldn't have even brought it up. People taking as verbatim what Jack Stoof has said since Forrest died. Before Forrest died, Jack was very quiet. Who's Jack Stoof? Nobody knew. It's just bullshit. Sorry, it's just bullshit. All right. The last interview with Mr. X got a lot of comments, got a lot of views. For my channel, it was a very successful part one. And I know people are already asking about part two, and that's wonderful. As I said, it takes a little bit of audio editing to do what I'm doing, where I'm masking Mr. X's voice, and then I'm because every time it goes from one to the other person, I have to get in there and edit that bit of audio to adjust the parameters of the equalizer setting. So it takes a little work. But anyway, just about done, which isn't bad considering it just came out not too long ago. The other thing that was mentioned by Mr. X is this concept, well, it's come up now also in the comments. That's what, after all, I'm referring to as the comments. A couple of people started talking about the fact that Jack apparently outed himself because he wanted to get this $10,000 reward by Mike McConnell. Is that his name? Mike McDonald? This was a guy who just said, if someone can really prove to me they found the treasure, they've got $10,000. Well, people are now saying that's why Jack outed himself. Again, revisionist history. Things are changing so quickly. It's just like watching the news every day, how they just change the news because, the corporate media get on there and they tell you a new story or they change the story and everyone just, not everyone, a lot of us don't. But some people just, okay, that's how it is. No, well, where's your critical thinking going? Where's your critical thinking going? Why can't you just remember what happened a month ago and bring that to the table when you get new information, right? That's for another day. Did Jack out himself because of a $10,000 reward. I asked this question to who should know better. I'm getting a definite image of a little black, it's coming into view, it's in my mind, it's a little furry black cat, little tiny black female cat. And she's standing inside my front door and she's staring at the door. She's trying to look beyond the door into the outside. That's her way of letting me know she wants to go outside. So just bear with me for a second. Ow! God! Jesus! Oh, God! I was wrong. She's on the guest bed. Okay, so I asked Barbara Anderson. I said, since you were kind of the one that was called out by Jack himself as kind of forcing his hand into coming out, what is your, well, I'll just tell you what I asked her in an email. I said, can I get to Barb Anderson, in the eyes of Mr. X, the person who has, notice I didn't say the woman, the person who has done the most to further any kind of legal efficacy into the understanding of the hunt. After all, you're saying, yeah, but what did she accomplish? Well, according to Jack, she accomplished him outing himself and giving us his name. Remember, folks, we didn't even have Jack Stoof's name. Right? Because Jack wants to remain anonymous. Boy, I tell you, before Forrest Fenn died, I mean, Jack Stoof was anonymous. He was Mr. X squared. He was very anonymous. So anyway, this is what I wrote Barb. Can I get a quote from you to disabuse people of the notions that Jack outed himself because he wanted Mike to give him the $10,000? People say the claim is in the new book. I haven't read the new book. I don't want to read the new book. Okay? That's not a put down to the new book. You know what I'm going to tell you? I'm not going to read that book because the solve is not in the book. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'll spend $50 on a book if it has a solve in it, gives me a location. But I'm not going to go get a little fluff book about, Jack's favorite color and some other bullshit that I don't care about. Sorry about the cussing today, but I'm pissed off. It happens. A lot, actually. People say the claim is in the new book. Obviously, you forced Jack to reveal his identity, but somehow the truth is being revised. From the comments I'm getting, after part 1, I started seeing people talk about how that Jack outed himself, not because of what Mr. X said, but because of the reward. Okay, so I said, what do you feel about this? Can I get a quote? Barb very gallantly and graciously responded with 3 points. And of course, Mr. X said, Jack could have gone to the court and muted Barb, and basically he could have just said, look, it's very dangerous for me to be outed. Look what's happened to the Forrest Fenn family. They've had crazy people invading their house, etc. He said, it's very certain that the court would have said, you're right, it's a dangerous situation, we're not going to make your name known. And what does Barb say in point number 1 that she makes? She says, Jack outed himself in public immediately prior to the subpoena return date, which is very indicative of the fact that he's responding to it. But she then says, there was no need to publicly out himself. Barb has given us a little clue there. She's kind of going, he didn't really have to, but he did. So she kind of bluffed him. That's the way, I'm not speaking for Barb Anderson, but she says he outed himself in public immediately prior to the subpoena return date. There was no need to publicly out himself. That's her first point. Her second point is, in my opinion, Jack is a spoof finder to buy time. I believe the real end is coming. I'm very surprised that a person would not insist on knowing the solve before including him, Jack, in a book. I absolutely agree, and that's what I've said, why I'm not going to go out and buy it. And believe me, I have heard or read little bits and pieces about the book. I see nothing of interest. I mean, really, I've read a couple things, and none of it was, Jack outed himself because of the reward. Is that really in the book? Well, I don't believe that's true. Number 3, Barb says, I can return to court if necessary down the road, but I suspect that won't be necessary. I'm continuing to be teased. I don't really know what she means when she says that. I know she's making that a personal reference about them teasing her. Hey, folks, if you think that sounds a little crazy, from what I'm beginning to understand about all this, nothing's too crazy. Just look the way that Jack just comes out, gives all these comments after Fenn's died, and completely revises the chase for some people. Not for the old school people. We remember before Fenn died, but for the people that are now getting into it, or maybe just to have short-term memories, don't have long, they're just like going along with it. Like, okay, this is the new story. Okay, so that's how Barb responded to my question when I asked her about the comments that people are now saying that Jack outed himself just to get this $10,000 reward for some guy, Mike McDonald, was that it? Sorry if I got that wrong, I'll correct it in the titles. So I pushed this question out also to Mr. X. Mr. X is kind of who started the comments, right? I'm doing an interview with Mr. X, the first part, and he says in it, let's not forget about, that Barb Anderson made Jack reveal who he was. As Barb says, he outed himself in public immediately prior to the subpoena return date. Duh, that means he saw it coming and he outed himself. There was no need to publicly out himself. Jack or his lawyers, Jack the genius. Forrest Fenn said Jack's a genius, remember? Because Jack said so it must be true. Right? Well, Jack apparently publicly outed himself when he didn't have to, immediately prior to the subpoena return date. And if you want to say, well, no, that was because he really was doing it and he just didn't want to admit he's after $10,000. Guys, he just found $1 million or $5 million. But if you want to take, and I'm not even keeping the sequence of events here clear, but if that's the reason, well, then Jack's lying, right? Because it sure looks like he outed himself because of Barb. Anyway, I don't want to confuse what shouldn't be that confusing. So I asked Mr. X. I said, well, I'm going to get a quote from Barb, and then I'm going to ask Mr. X. What does he think about the fact that people are saying, no, it was because of this reward, and it wasn't Barb Anderson who forced Jack's hand? Apparently, that didn't have to be forced, but Jack, the genius, didn't know that, or his lawyers didn't know it, or they didn't know it, and Jack didn't know enough to call him on it for not knowing it. You know what I'm saying? I love this guy, Mr. X. I said, okay, so what do you think about the fact that Jack actually outed himself to get the reward? Not because Barb was suing him. I get this rather short reply. Rather fail with honor than to succeed by fraud. I said, good one, and I'll use it, but I meant commentators are saying Jack revealed his ID to get the $10,000 reward rather than because of Barb. He said, I believe that's bullshit. It's insane that Jack would expose himself. Why would anyone expose their life to all of this for $10,000? In other words, he's saying, for $10,000, when I've already found a treasure worth between $1 million and $5 million, I'm going to be so greedy to get my hands on $10,000 that I'm going to let my name be known. So all these whack jobs, like the guy who broke into the Fenn house and had to be held at gunpoint by Zoe or Kelly or whatever, and blah, blah, all this stuff and the stalking and all that. He's going to open himself up to that for $10,000 measly dollars when he just found millions of dollars worth of treasure? Good point. I believe that's bullshit. So these commentators are wrong. The book's wrong. I haven't read the book. I'm just putting out what I see out there and what people say to me, and then I just respond. And I got some responses, one from Barb and one from Mr. X. And that's all I have to say about it. I said to Mr. X, "Is that a quote for the video? I like it." He said, "Definitely." This guy's not messing around. And he's damn smart. Excuse me. He's damn smart. And he has a lot of good ideas. And let me tell you, this first part got a lot of response. And it got a lot of it got a lot of views for my channel. And people seem to like what they're hearing. The last thing we're going to do here is, this concept that Jack has been over in Puerto Rico. Living in Puerto Rico, was living in Puerto Rico. I'll put up the address that someone found of him in Puerto Rico. It was on something called peoplesearchnow.com. I didn't go on there and pay to get peoplesearchnow.com and verify this. I'm just putting up the screenshot. And Puerto Rico has a very unique system in that they defer or abate. I don't want to screw this up. Someone once told me how this works. I think you can, bottom line is you don't have to pay taxes for 20 years. And so whatever you get within that 20-year period, you don't have to pay taxes on. So if you get a treasure chest, it's a good place to be living at the moment. How could that even happen? I mean, who's thinking of all this stuff behind the scenes? See what I mean? There's much more to this than seems to be obvious at first hand. So I'm suspicious of Jack, and I'm suspicious of Forrest Fenn. Enough said. Let's go on to part 2 and see what's going on. And then I'll start working on part 3. Okay, very good. Thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
So, certainly one of the issues would be Jack living in, whether he's currently or not living in Puerto Rico. Did he do that for tax purposes because Puerto Rico has the best tax abatement issues for U.S. citizens to move there that I know? Was that created by Fenn and the Fenn Estate? Once Fenn passed away, then Jack came out with, he and I were friends. Remember, Forrest never even congratulated Jack. There are so many issues.
I know.
That are left dangling. I do think, though, that I will go to my grave without knowing really where the treasure was found. I just don't think that the courts will compel Jack or the Fenn Estate, for that matter.
And we'll never know, and by the same token, we'll never know how the poem worked. We'll never understand the mechanics of the poem, which is what's driving everyone crazy. Everyone just wants to know how close they came to figuring the poem out, and we're never, ever going to know. I agree.
Right. And that's why, again, if we go back to Masquerade, the treasure's whereabouts were unknown for over 20 years. In 2009, there was a BBC radio program called The Grand Masquerade in, I think it was broadcast in July of 2009, and it told the entire story of the creation and solution of the puzzle. I think people are desperate to know from Jack, because allegedly he would be the only one that would know how he found it. Did he actually know what the clues were, the home of ground, where Wormwater's home, etc., etc. But I don't believe the courts will ever compel Jack, or the Fenn Estate for that matter, to disclose it.
I know, it's just sad. Well, how about something else that... And I've talked to another searcher friend who kind of instigated the idea. He was the one also that turned up the information about the academician who Forrest told the location to. And I think that other people have discussed this guy. I'm not going to name his name, but other people have. And, you know, this same guy was the one who called the Fenn Estate. I think he called the bookstore. And he asked that lady who you say Kyle's now suing, where did the cancer money go to that was, what, too far to walk? I think 10% of the proceeds went to this cancer fund. And she got back to him and said, one of the grandkids, I think, is in charge of it. And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. He writes back, but what is I just want the name of it. And they were like, they never responded. Why is it? And I knew of another person who went the same exact process, and I think emailed them at least twice, kind of following up on the other guy's story. And they just refused to talk to him at all. So why is there any, I don't know. I mean, obviously you'd have to have a reason to even inquire. And to me, that 10% for the Fenn Estate should not even be a big deal. I just find it odd that they just don't immediately just say, oh, it went to Cancer Research ABC Fund, you know? No problem.
I think it's certainly disturbing. If people bought the book or multiple books because of the catalyst of it going, of part of the proceeds going to a cancer charity, there should be some accountability.
Yeah.
Why there isn't, I don't know. I mean, Collective Works Bookstore should certainly have some disclosure and some required disclosure if that was the case, but I don't know why they did not. Maybe one of these lawsuits will enjoin that part, but I just don't know.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool if the Kyle thing could enjoin that, but I get the feeling Kyle's case is going to be thrown out before it even starts.
I mean, certainly it seems that at least everything that I read, it all seems a little ludicrous, and I think the San Lazaro part of it, I'm sure that people there know that the ring, I think the emerald ring, was found in San Lazaro. There's a Spanish emerald ring that was found in San Lazaro and allegedly put in the treasure chest for somebody to find. I think that's why, amongst other things, why they believe that there's a link with San Lazaro. But Fenn sold it years ago. He did not hold on to it. It was not an asset of the Fenn Estate, I believe.
The ring?
No, the actual location of San Lazaro.
San Lazaro, yeah, he sold it. Definitely sold it.
Dirt. Yeah.
And also that ring was something that Jack said that was not in the treasure chest, correct? And that he might have even dropped it. Or maybe Fenn dropped it as he was taking the chest to hide it. I'm pretty sure that's true.
There were a lot of things that were in there from the photos that you couldn't delineate. There were things that really bothered me, certainly, that I couldn't understand, that the photos were not detailed enough. But I don't know if there was really much that the estate could have done, or for that matter, when they disclosed the finding, to really satisfy everyone that's out there. Remember, Eric, what will happen is, even if Jack had disclosed, or the estate had disclosed, or Fenn had disclosed while he was alive, where the chest was, etc., it still would invite a plethora of lawsuits that are coming in there, because people are never satisfied. Remember, there can only be usually one finder, unless people go in a team. And another anomaly that, again, I've thought about over and over, why did Jack have to go to the same spot 25 times? If you and I had a certain area that we were searching, maybe you search a handful of times, 2, 3, 5 times.
Yeah.
And then you move on to another space, because you can say, I've searched that area. And especially Jack, the guy that was a medical student from Michigan, that had allegedly no money, that he stated, a guy with student loans.
Yeah.
There are a whole lot of things that are out there. I just don't understand it. It just...
He was
supernaturally sure of that location. And I'll tell you, if Forrest Fenn had told me privately, look, I'm not going to tell you, this is how it almost sounds like to me. Forrest Fenn agreed to tell Jack the general location, told him this is where you'll find the blaze if you go look, and Jack went out there absolutely knowing that he had the location, and that's why he went, as you put it, far more many times than anyone else would. And just to the point where he would cry after he would search and not find it. Go back to his car, and he said he cried sometimes. And then
Eric, didn't Fenn say that you would walk with confidence?
Yeah. But that's what I've been saying. I think Fenn, because he wanted to make sure Jack found it and yet was not told exactly where the treasure. That's why I think Jack doesn't even really know how the poem works. Other people have talked about this. He doesn't really seem to be able to explain. I mean, he would say, well, I don't want to tell you how the poem works. But Jack himself has said, look, I found it by listening to Fenn, reading interviews, really figuring out where he wanted to die. And you're telling me, I mean, to me, that's a great idea, I suppose, but you were able to pinpoint it down to the point where you would go 25 times, but then you can't actually find it. To me, it was as if Fenn said, I want you to be, you're the one that's on it the best. I've been seeing some of the stuff you're putting on the net. I'm going to tell you, I want it over with. I want the treasure hunt over with. I'm dying, whatever. He didn't even have to tell him that. I'm going to give you the location, but I want you to actually have to find it. So Jack goes in there knowing that he's in the right place, location, but he still has to figure out the blaze and find it. And then what does he do when he finally finds it after 25 trips? He calls Fenn. It's almost like he said, okay, I've actually found it now. Do we proceed? I mean, that's what it seems like. And then like, oh yeah, Fenn apparently goes, yeah, go ahead and take it out. That's just weird as hell too, isn't it? That he would call Fenn.
Eric, remember, we're all dancing on the graves of some of the people. There were at least 5 people who died searching for the treasure, right?
Yes, that they absolutely can confirm, and a few more that people knew they were interested, but they didn't necessarily say this trip was the one that they were looking, but they might have been looking. So maybe up to 7 or 8.
Right, and that's why I would like some definitive closure for these families. At least if it really was some disclosure, maybe it would give them a little bit of solace. I mean, we know the background, or most of us know the background of Fenn. He was in major conflict with federal antiquities laws for grave robbing.
Yes.
There was an operation called Operation Cerberus Action. That was an FBI investigation. They raided his home in 2009 as part of that investigation for looting in the Four Corners area. They found things that were there that he probably should not have had. No charges got filed, and I think he was always angry at the FBI because I think more than anything, Forrest Fenn was interested in his legacy. You know, people don't talk about, there were 2 people in that case, in that Operation Cerberus Action, that committed suicide. They blamed, and Fenn always blamed the FBI for their deaths.
Yes.
So, again, people can read about that, but certainly those are issues that I think formed Forrest Fenn's opinion, and one of the reasons probably for the search. So, I don't know.
Yes, if people don't understand what you're referring to, some people speculate that Fenn wanted that search to go on, so basically you would have all these people tromping all over the place, driving the federales crazy. I mean, it was that simple. It was like it was a very simple act of revenge.
Definitely. Within the last few months, you saw that they sentenced the guy to jail and fined him because he dug up a national park. I think it was Yellowstone. But he dug up a national park. You can't do that. I mean, there are federal laws that protect those parks. You're not even allowed to take a stone or... Unless you're Barry Goldwater.
Remember that story? Fenn was out in Arizona, and he's digging up he's robbing Indian graves. They're in a cave somewhere with some friends. Barry Goldwater shows up in a helicopter, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, we're about to get busted!" And Fenn says, "Oh no, he's here to hunt with us." And they said, "My God, are you kidding? He's a senator." He goes, "Yeah, exactly. He's a senator. He makes the laws. He doesn't have to worry about," which really pissed me off. This idea that the Congress think they're above the law, but obviously, and Barry Goldwater was a staunch conservative, but there you go.
Right. Well, he served for 3 decades in the Arizona Senate, and he ran for, I recall, the Republican presidential nomination in 1964. But have people that are national parks, it's not legal. There are federal laws against it.
Yeah.
And if this was really in Yellowstone, I mean, we've all read that Fenn stated that he spoke to estate attorneys about what would happen when somebody found the chest, what kind of tax implications there were, what things needed to be done. That's why I go back to Jack being in Puerto Rico. Did they do it to get around the federal tax that would be for earnings? Because it would really be earnings when he found it. Where is the IRS within here? So again, another anomaly certainly would be, where is the IRS? Did Fenn just stroke a check to the IRS once it was found? We just don't know. You know, there's so many dangling questions that are out there that may never be answered.
I know, it drives me crazy. Kind of. It just niggles at the back of my brain, this concept that we're never going to find out, and I really think we're never going to find out. It's very irritating to everybody.
Why hasn't the chest been sold?
Exactly.
He made so much money. If he was a starving, graduate student, where is it? Again, you're talking about a lot of time has passed now. You can have an asset, but that asset has no value for him, at least, until it's sold. You can have a piece of gold or a diamond or emerald ring or the frog or any of that stuff that was allegedly inside that chest when he found it. But if it's sitting, and he claimed it was sitting in a vault in New Mexico, in an attorney's possession, how is Jack paying his bills?
I don't know. Can you hold on for a commercial?
Sure, of course.
Oh, October's getting brush. Part 3's coming up. As soon as I get it done, I'll put it out. Everybody have a good one. Oh my goodness.